The town of Willow Creek was as quiet as it had always been. Nestled in a patchwork of green hills and tree-lined streets, the town rarely made headlines. Its small population prided itself on neat lawns, friendly neighbors, and a sense of calm that made it seem like time moved slower here. Officer Ethan Harris drove his patrol car down Main Street, his hands gripping the wheel in a familiar rhythm. The low hum of the engine was the only sound in the car, save for the occasional crackle of the police radio. It was a routine drive. Like hundreds before, his eyes flicked over the rows of small businesses, their signs glowing faintly in the early evening light. Ethan had been on the force in Willow Creek for over a decade. At 42, he was respected by his peers for his unwavering dedication and level-headedness. He had a reputation for getting the job done, no matter how small or mundane the task. Yet, beneath the stoic exterior, Ethan was a man who lived in solitude. His apartment on the outskirts of town was sparse: a couch, a bed, a coffee table with rings etched into the wood from years of forgotten mugs. Family photos were absent from his walls, as were the echoes of laughter or companionship. Ethan often told himself that his life was simple by design. Better this way, he'd mutter under his breath when loneliness crept in during the long nights. But as much as he tried to convince himself, the ache in his chest lingered, a reminder of the dreams he'd shelved long ago. As he approached Maple Grove Park, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He slowed the car, squinting through the windshield at the dimly lit playground. At first, it seemed empty, the swing set swaying gently in the evening breeze. But then he saw her. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sat on one of the swings. Her legs pumped back and forth, though there wasn't much enthusiasm in the motion. Her dark, curly hair caught the golden light of the setting sun and her small frame seemed dwarfed by the vastness of the park. Ethan frowned. Children didn't usually play at the park this late, especially alone. He parked the car and watched her for a moment. She didn't seem to notice him, her eyes fixed on the ground as if lost in thought. Odd, Ethan muttered, reaching for his thermos. He took a sip of lukewarm coffee and glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was almost 6. Maybe her parents were nearby, watching from one of the benches. He scanned the area but saw no one. After a few more minutes, Ethan shook his head and put the car in gear. "Not my business," he muttered, his voice gruff even to his own ears. The girl wasn't breaking any rules, and it wasn't illegal to sit on a swing. Yet, as he drove away, the image of her small figure lingered in his mind. That night, Ethan returned to his apartment, the echoes of the day playing out in his mind as they always did. He reheated a frozen dinner, his thoughts wandering back to the girl at the park. Something about her had unsettled him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. "Kids these days," he mumbled, stabbing at his microwaved meal with a fork. But no matter how much he tried to push the thought away, the memory of her quiet presence under the fading sunlight clung to him like a shadow. The next evening, as Ethan made his usual patrol, he found himself slowing down near Maple Grove Park again. The swing set was empty this time, the playground bathed in the amber glow of the streetlights. For reasons he couldn't explain, he felt a pang of disappointment. "Get it together, Harris," he told himself, shaking his head. Yet, as he drove off, he couldn't help but wonder about the girl. Where was she now? Was she safe? And why had she been alone? The following afternoon, Ethan's patrol brought him back to the park once more. This time, he parked the car and got out, his boots crunching against the gravel path. The air was crisp, and the faint scent of pine lingered from the nearby woods. The playground was empty at first glance. Ethan walked toward the swings, his eyes scanning the area out of habit. He was about to turn back when a small movement caught his attention. Underneath the slide, tucked away in the shadows, was the girl. She was curled up, her arms wrapped around her knees as if trying to keep warm. A thin, tattered blanket lay draped over her shoulders, and a worn backpack sat beside her. Ethan's chest tightened. "Hey there," he said, his voice softer than usual as he approached her. The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were wide and dark, filled with a mix of fear and exhaustion. She looked at Ethan, her body tensing as if preparing to flee. "It's okay," Ethan said quickly, crouching down to her level. "I'm Officer Harris. You don't have to be scared." She didn't reply, her gaze darting to the badge on his chest and then to the car parked nearby. What's your name? Ethan asked, keeping his tone gentle. Maya, she whispered after a long pause. Her voice was small, almost swallowed by the breeze. Ethan nodded. Nice to meet you. Maya, are you here by yourself? She hesitated, then nodded. Where's your family? He pressed, concern creeping into his voice. My mom, she said, her lower lip trembling. She told me to wait here. She said she'd come back. Ethan frowned. How long have you been waiting? Maya looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. 5 days, she admitted, her voice breaking. She said she had to find work. But, she hasn't come back. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Maya, you can't stay here by yourself. It's not safe. Let me help you. Tears welled up in her eyes. But she didn't move. What if she comes back and I'm not here? She'll think I left her. Ethan's heart ached at the desperation in her voice. I promise, he said, his voice firm yet kind. We'll make sure your mom knows where to find you. But for now, let's get you somewhere warm and safe. Okay? After a long moment, Maya nodded reluctantly. Ethan stood and offered her his hand. As she placed her small, trembling hand in his, a sense of purpose surged through him, a determination he hadn't felt in years. This was no ordinary patrol. This was something more. And Ethan Harris wasn't going to let this little girl face the world alone. Ethan opened the door to his patrol car and helped Maya climb inside. Her backpack clutched tightly against her chest. The car's interior smelled faintly of leather and coffee. And Maya shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat, her eyes darting between Ethan and the dashboard. You hungry? Ethan asked as he started the engine. Keeping his tone light, he glanced at her and saw the hesitant nod. I know a place nearby that makes a mean grilled cheese. Maya didn't respond, but Ethan noticed the faintest flicker of interest in her eyes. He pulled out of the park and headed toward a diner he frequented during late shifts. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, and the food was reliable. As they drove, Ethan kept an eye on her in the rearview mirror. She looked out the window, her face pale and drawn. The tension in her small body was palpable. Ethan's mind raced with questions. Who was her mother? Why hadn't she come back? And how had this little girl managed to survive alone for 5 days? At the diner, Ethan led Maya to a booth in the corner. The warm lighting and the smell of frying bacon seemed to relax her slightly. And she slid into the seat without protest. A waitress approached, her smile widening as she saw Ethan. Officer Harris, she greeted. You're out late. Who's this? This is Maya, Ethan replied, glancing at the little girl. She's a friend. Could you get us a couple of grilled cheeses and some hot chocolate? The waitress nodded, her expression softening as she looked at Maya. Coming right up. When the food arrived, Maya hesitated for only a moment before picking up the sandwich. She took small bites at first, but hunger quickly overtook her, and she devoured the meal. Ethan watched silently, his chest tightening at the sight. How long had it been since she'd had a proper meal? You want more? He asked when she finished. Maya shook her head, wiping her mouth with the napkin. Thank you, she said softly, her voice barely audible. You're welcome, Ethan replied. He leaned back in the booth, studying her. Maya, I need you to tell me a little more about your mom. What's her name? Olivia Brooks, Maya answered, clutching her hands together on the table. Ethan nodded, committing the name to memory. And do you know where she was going to look for work? Maya shook her head. She didn't say. She just told me to wait at the playground and that she'd be back soon. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. He didn't want to alarm her, but the situation was clearly more complicated than he'd initially thought. Okay, he said gently, I'm going to do everything I can to find your mom. But for tonight, I'm going to take you somewhere safe. Maya's eyes widened with fear. But what if she comes back and I'm not there? Ethan leaned forward, his expression earnest. I'll leave a note at the park. If she comes back, she'll know where to find you. I promise. Maya, I won't stop until you're back with your mom. After a long pause, Maya nodded reluctantly. The local social services center was quiet when Ethan arrived with Maya. A woman named Linda, who managed emergency placements for children, greeted them at the door. Her warm demeanor and calm voice seemed to put Maya slightly at ease. Ethan filled out the necessary paperwork, explaining Maya's situation as best he could. Linda led Maya to a small room with a bed, a desk, and a basket of toys. Maya clutched her backpack tightly and glanced back at Ethan. Her eyes filled with uncertainty. "You'll be safe here," Ethan assured her. "I'll come back tomorrow to check on you. Okay?" Maya hesitated, then nodded. "You promise you'll look for my mom?" Ethan crouched down to her level, meeting her gaze. "I promise. Now get some rest." "Maya, you've been really brave." As he left the center, Ethan's mind raced. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. But where would he start? He needed more information about Olivia Brooks, her work history, her connections, anything that could provide a lead. Back at the station, Ethan sat at his desk, poring over reports and making phone calls. He reached out to local shelters, hospitals, and businesses, describing Olivia and asking if anyone had seen her. Each call brought the same response. No one matching her description had been there. The hours ticked by, and Ethan's frustration grew. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He couldn't shake the image of Maya's tearful face, her quiet bravery despite everything she had been through. As dawn broke over Willow Creek, Ethan made one last call, to a hospital in a neighboring town. This time, the answer was different. "Yes," the nurse on the other end said, her voice cautious. "We admitted a woman matching that description about 2 weeks ago. She was in a car accident. She's in stable condition but still unconscious." Ethan's breath caught. "What's her name?" "Olivia Brooks." For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. Relief and dread washed over him in equal measure. He thanked the nurse and hung up, his mind racing. He had found Maya's mother, but her condition meant the road ahead would be anything but easy. Ethan drove to the hospital, his stomach in knots. As he walked down the sterile hallways, he rehearsed what he would say to Maya. How would he explain this to her? Would she even understand? When he reached Olivia's room, he paused outside the door. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The woman in the bed looked fragile, her face pale and bruised. Tubes and wires surrounded her, and the steady beep of the heart monitor filled the room. Ethan approached slowly, studying her face. She seemed familiar, though he couldn't place why. Then it hit him. Olivia Brooks was Olivia Carter, his high school sweetheart. The realization left Ethan reeling. Memories flooded back. Late-night talks, shared dreams, and the heartbreak of going their separate ways after graduation. He hadn't seen her in over 20 years. Yet here she was, unconscious and vulnerable. Ethan sank into a chair beside her bed, his emotions swirling. He thought of Maya, waiting patiently for her mother, and of the woman he had once cared for so deeply. Fate had brought them together again in the most unexpected and heartbreaking way. "I'll take care of her, Olivia," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "I'll make sure Maya is safe. I promise." Ethan drove back to the social services center, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotion. Olivia Brooks, or Olivia Carter, as he had known her, was lying in a hospital bed, fighting to recover. And Maya, the little girl waiting for her mother, didn't know how much her life was about to change. When he arrived, Maya was sitting in the playroom, drawing on a sheet of paper with crayons. She looked up as he walked in, her face lighting up for a moment before worry clouded her expression. "Did you find her?" Maya asked, clutching the crayon in her hand. Ethan crouched down in front of her, trying to keep his voice steady. "I did," he said gently. "Your mom's in the hospital. She was in a car accident, but she's going to be okay. The doctors are taking good care of her." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "She's hurt?" she whispered. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "She is, but she's getting better. It might take a little time before she can see you, but I promise we'll visit her as soon as the doctors say it's okay." Maya looked down at her drawing, her small hands trembling. "I want to see her now," she said, her voice cracking. Ethan reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I know, Maya, I know it's hard to wait, but your mom would want to make sure you're safe and happy while she's healing. And I'll be here with you every step of the way." For the first time, Maya leaned into Ethan's touch, her tiny body trembling as she cried softly. Ethan felt his chest tighten. In that moment, he realized just how much this little girl had come to mean to him. Over the next few days, Ethan visited Maya regularly at the social services center. He brought her small treats, a chocolate bar, a stuffed animal, or a new coloring book, and each time, her smile grew a little brighter. Slowly, she began to trust him. "Do you think she misses me?" Maya asked one afternoon as they sat together, her voice quiet. Ethan nodded. I know she does. Your mom loves you more than anything. Maya, she's fighting to get better so she can be with you again. Maya looked at him with wide, hopeful eyes. Do you think she's lonely? Ethan hesitated, then smiled gently. She might be, but you know what? I've been visiting her at the hospital. And I tell her all about you. I think it makes her feel better, knowing you're safe and waiting for her. Maya's face lit up. You tell her about me? Of course, Ethan replied. I tell her how brave you are. And how you've been drawing beautiful pictures. She'd be so proud of you. Maya. The little girl's smile grew. And Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. This bond, so unexpected yet so natural, was becoming one of the most meaningful connections he had ever experienced. A week later, Ethan received the call he had been waiting for. Olivia had regained consciousness. He drove to the hospital, his heart pounding with a mix of relief and nerves. When he entered Olivia's room, she was awake, her eyes tired but alert. She turned her head toward him, and for a moment, their gazes locked. Ethan, she said, her voice hoarse. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. It's me, Olivia. Tears welled up in her eyes. Maya, is she okay? Where is she? She's safe, Ethan assured her, stepping closer to the bed. She's been staying at the social services center while you've been here. She's been so brave. Olivia, she misses you. Olivia let out a shuddering breath, tears streaming down her cheeks. I never wanted to leave her, she whispered. I didn't know what else to do. We lost everything, and I thought I could find work. I thought, it's okay, Ethan interrupted gently. You did what you thought was best for her. She's been waiting for you. And I promised her I'd bring you back to her. Olivia looked at him, her expression softening. You've done so much for her, for us. Thank you, Ethan. Ethan shook his head. You don't have to thank me. She's an incredible little girl. Olivia, she's been through so much. But she hasn't given up hope. She's stronger than anyone I've ever met. When the doctors finally cleared Olivia for visitors, Ethan brought Maya to the hospital. The little girl clung to his hand as they walked down the hallway, her eyes wide with nervous anticipation. When they reached Olivia's room, Ethan knelt down beside Maya. She's just inside, he said softly. Are you ready? Maya nodded, her grip on his hand tightening. Ethan pushed open the door, and Maya froze in the doorway. Olivia was sitting up in bed, her face pale but lit with joy as she saw her daughter. Maya, Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mommy, Maya cried, dropping Ethan's hand and running across the room. She climbed onto the bed and threw her arms around Olivia, sobbing into her chest. Ethan watched from the doorway, his own eyes misty as mother and daughter reunited. The love and relief in the room were palpable, and he felt a lump form in his throat. Thank you, Olivia mouthed to him over Maya's shoulder. Ethan nodded, stepping back to give them space. He had kept his promise. But he knew this was only the beginning of their journey. In the weeks that followed, Ethan helped Olivia and Maya transition into a new home. The community of Willow Creek rallied around them, donating furniture, clothes, and food to help them get back on their feet. Ethan became a regular presence in their lives, stopping by to help with errands or spend time with Maya. Their bond grew stronger, and Maya began to see him as more than just the officer who had found her. To her, he was family. One afternoon, as they sat in the park, Maya looked up at Ethan with a shy smile. Can I ask you something? Of course, Ethan replied. Is it okay if I call you Dad? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You take care of me like a daddy would. Ethan's heart swelled, and he knelt down to her level, his voice thick with emotion. Maya, I'd be honored if you called me Dad. Maya threw her arms around his neck, and Ethan held her close, feeling a deep sense of belonging he hadn't known in years. As the holiday season approached, Ethan, Olivia, and Maya celebrated their first Christmas together in their new home. The small apartment was filled with laughter, the aroma of home-cooked food, and the warmth of love. For Ethan, it was more than a holiday, it was a new beginning. He had found a family in the most unexpected way, and in helping Olivia and Maya, he had rediscovered his own capacity for love and connection. That night, as the three of them sat by the Christmas tree, Ethan looked at the two people who had changed his life forever. He smiled, knowing that this was just the start of their story, a story of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The new year brought a sense of hope and renewal. But life wasn't without its challenges for Ethan. Olivia and Maya. Adjusting to their new family dynamic required patience and understanding. Olivia's recovery was slow but steady. Physical therapy sessions became part of her routine, and Ethan often accompanied her, offering encouragement. Maya would sit nearby, watching with wide eyes as her mother worked through the exercises. One afternoon, as Olivia struggled to lift a weighted ball during therapy, she glanced at Maya. "I'm doing this for you," she said, her voice trembling with determination. "You're doing great, Mom," Maya cheered, clapping her small hands. Ethan watched the exchange with a quiet smile. Olivia's resilience reminded him of the woman he had fallen for all those years ago. Despite her struggles, she faced each challenge with unwavering strength. For Maya, the transition to a new home and school was daunting. She had spent months feeling isolated, and making friends didn't come easily. Ethan noticed her hesitation one morning as he dropped her off at school. "You nervous?" he asked, his voice gentle. Maya nodded, clutching her backpack straps. "What if nobody likes me?" Ethan crouched down to her level. "You've got a heart of gold, Maya. Anyone who gets to know you is lucky. Just be yourself, and you'll make friends in no time." Her small smile warmed his heart. And by the end of the week, she was excitedly telling him about a new friend, Lily, who had shared her lunch with her. As much as Ethan embraced his new role in their lives, doubts crept in late at night when the apartment was quiet. He wondered if he was doing enough, if he could truly be the father figure Maya deserved. One evening, as he helped Maya with her math homework, she looked up at him, her brow furrowed. "Why don't you ever get mad when I get things wrong?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Because mistakes are part of learning. Besides, I make plenty of them myself." Maya tilted her head thoughtfully. "You don't seem like you make mistakes." The words struck Ethan, and he set down the pencil. "Oh, I do, Maya. Lots of them. But what matters is that we keep trying. And I'll always be here to help you." Her small hand slipped into his, and she whispered, "You're the best dad." As Olivia regained her strength, she began looking for work again, determined to rebuild her independence. She had been a waitress before the accident but wanted to find something more stable for Maya's sake. Ethan, recognizing her determination, reached out to a friend who ran a bakery in town. "She's hardworking and reliable," Ethan told his friend, "and she makes a mean apple pie." Olivia was skeptical at first. "I've never worked in a bakery," she admitted as she sat across from Ethan in the living room. "You can learn," he replied with a reassuring smile. "And I've seen you whip up some amazing cookies with Maya." The job turned out to be a perfect fit. Olivia thrived in the bakery's warm, bustling environment, and Maya loved visiting after school to taste-test new treats. One evening, as the three of them sat around the dinner table, Maya asked a question that caught both Ethan and Olivia off guard. "Are we a real family now?" Olivia blinked, her fork pausing midair. "Of course we are, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" Maya shrugged, looking down at her plate. "Lily said families have moms and dads. But we only have you and Officer Ethan." Ethan exchanged a glance with Olivia, his heart pounding. He had grown to love Maya as if she were his own daughter. But he hadn't been sure how to express it. Now, the moment was staring him in the face. "Well," Ethan began, his voice steady, "families come in all shapes and sizes. What makes a family is love. And if you and your mom will have me, I'd like to be part of this family forever." Maya's face lit up, and she ran around the table to hug him tightly. Olivia's eyes shimmered with tears, and she reached out to take Ethan's hand. "You already are," Olivia said softly, her voice filled with emotion. As their bond deepened, Ethan found himself opening up about his own life. One evening, as he and Olivia sat on the porch after Maya had gone to bed, he shared his regrets about the years they had lost. "I should have stayed in touch," Ethan said, staring at the stars. "I always wondered what happened to you." Olivia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Life happened," she said simply. "But maybe we weren't ready then. Maybe we needed to go through everything we did to find our way back to each other now." Ethan turned to her, his heart full of gratitude. "I'm glad we did." Spring arrived, bringing with it a sense of renewal. Maya thrived in school, Olivia excelled at the bakery, and Ethan found joy in his patrols, knowing he had a family to come home to. One sunny afternoon, they went to Maple Grove Park, the place where their journey had begun. Maya raced to the swings, her laughter echoing through the air as Ethan pushed her gently. As Olivia watched them, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The man she had once loved was now the anchor in her life. And her daughter was thriving in the warmth of their shared love. "Thank you, Ethan," Olivia said, her voice soft as she approached him. "For everything." Ethan turned to her, his expression earnest. "Thank you for letting me be part of your lives." They stood in the sunlight, watching Maya play, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt whole. Their family wasn't traditional, but it was filled with love, resilience, and the promise of a bright future. Months turned into years, and their bond only grew stronger. Ethan officially adopted Maya, a day marked by joyful tears and laughter. Their small family faced life's challenges together, knowing they were stronger as a team. Maya often told her friends, "I have the best mom and dad in the world." And Ethan, once a lonely officer going through the motions, had found his purpose and his home. They had built something beautiful out of heartbreak and hope, a family forged by love. The adoption ceremony was a simple but deeply moving affair, held in the courthouse of Willow Creek. Ethan stood in his best suit, his heart pounding as he signed the official documents. Beside him, Maya grinned from ear to ear, her excitement palpable. Olivia, tears shimmering in her eyes, held Maya's hand tightly as the judge declared Ethan her legal father. When the judge smiled and said, "Congratulations, you're now officially a family," Maya leapt into Ethan's arms, her small voice bursting with joy. "You're really my dad now," she cried, her face buried in his shoulder. Ethan held her close, his throat tight with emotion. "I've always been your dad, Maya," he whispered. "Now it's just official." After the ceremony, they headed to Maple Grove Community Center, where Olivia had arranged a small celebration. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers from the bakery gathered to celebrate this momentous occasion. The tables were covered in colorful decorations, and a banner read, "Welcome to the Harris family." There was laughter, food, and warmth as the town of Willow Creek rallied around the trio. Mrs. Johnson, their neighbor, raised a toast to Ethan, Olivia, and Maya. She said, her voice strong with emotion, "You've shown us what love, resilience, and family truly mean. We're so lucky to have you as part of our community." Cheers erupted, and Ethan glanced at Olivia, who squeezed his hand. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged, not just to a family but to a community that cared. As their lives began to settle, Ethan and Olivia made a joint decision to buy a small house on the outskirts of Willow Creek. It wasn't large, but it had everything they needed: a yard for Maya to play in, a cozy kitchen where Olivia could bake, and a room for Ethan to set up his home office. Maya's favorite feature was the tree in the backyard. She immediately declared it the climbing tree, and Ethan promised to build her a swing to hang from one of its sturdy branches. One weekend, as they unpacked boxes, Maya found a framed photo of her and Ethan at the park, taken shortly after their first Christmas together. She brought it to him, her face serious. "Can we put this in the living room?" she asked. Ethan took the frame from her, his heart swelling. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, brushing a hand over her curls. "That's where it belongs." They hung the photo above the fireplace, a symbol of their journey and the love that had brought them together. Months passed, and the bond between Ethan and Olivia grew deeper. One warm summer evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the yard, Ethan turned to Olivia, his heart racing. "Olivia," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves building inside him. "You and Maya have changed my life in ways I never thought possible. I was lost before I found you, both of you, and I don't ever want to lose what we've built together." Olivia's breath caught as Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring, the diamond catching the light. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice filled with hope and love. Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks as she nodded, a radiant smile breaking across her face. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. 1,000 times. "Yes." From the doorway, Maya squealed in delight. "Mom's going to marry Dad," she shouted, running to hug them both. The wedding took place in Willow Creek's picturesque town square, under a canopy of twinkling lights. It was a modest celebration, with close friends and family in attendance. Maya served as the flower girl, scattering petals down the aisle with uncontainable joy. As Ethan and Olivia exchanged vows, There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. They spoke of second chances, the power of love, and the family they had created together. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Maya cheered louder than anyone, running into their arms as they shared their first kiss as a married couple. The reception was filled with laughter, music, and dancing. Ethan twirled Maya around the dance floor, her giggles echoing through the night. Olivia watched with tears of happiness, knowing they had found something truly special. Life in Willow Creek settled into a joyful rhythm for the Harris family. Ethan continued his work as a police officer, but he approached each day with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing he had a family waiting for him at home. Olivia's bakery job flourished, and she even started experimenting with new recipes, inspired by Maya's imaginative ideas. Maya thrived in school, excelling in her studies and making more friends. Her bright, resilient spirit touched everyone she met, and she often told people, "I'm the luckiest girl in the world because I have the best mom and dad." On weekends, the three of them would visit the park, bake cookies together, or spend hours reading stories in the cozy living room. Their house became a home filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Years later, as Maya prepared to graduate from high school, Ethan and Olivia watched her with pride. She had grown into a strong, kind young woman, ready to face the world with confidence. During her graduation speech, Maya looked out at the crowd, her eyes locking onto Ethan and Olivia. "I wouldn't be here today without my parents," she said, her voice steady. "They taught me what it means to be brave, to love unconditionally, and to never give up, no matter how hard life gets. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for being my everything." Ethan's vision blurred with tears as Olivia took his hand. In that moment, he knew their journey, filled with hardships, hope, and transformation, had been worth every step. On a quiet evening, Ethan and Olivia sat on the porch of their home, now a little older but just as deeply in love. They watched as Maya, now an adult, visited with her own young family. Her laughter filled the yard, a sound Ethan never tired of hearing. "We did good," Olivia said, leaning her head against Ethan's shoulder. "We did," Ethan replied, his heart full. "Better than I ever imagined." As the sun set over Willow Creek, the Harris family's story stood as a testament to the power of love, resilience, and second chances, a legacy that would endure for generations.